Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the spaceship UES Horizon. He looked at the big screen that showed a blue and green planet slowly turning in space. The planet had the name P7742 in their computer files. Long-distance sensors said, "It might be good for life, but the first robot reports were strange." The world showed signs of animals that should have killed each other long ago, but somehow they lived together. Dr. Lisa Warren was the team's expert on alien life. She looked at the data coming from the planet with growing excitement. "Jake, look at this information. We have creatures that should be deadly enemies sharing the same areas. Pack hunters working with ambush predators. This goes against everything we know about how animals compete." The first group to land on the planet was small. Jake led the team with Lisa, Tony Garcia, who handled communications, and Sam Brooks, who was in charge of security. Their small ship went down through the air above the planet. They flew over huge forests where big creatures moved in groups. The animals were not hunting each other. Instead, they seemed to be working together. They landed in an open space surrounded by tall trees. Their equipment immediately picked up movement in the thick plants around them. What came out of the forest should have been a nightmare. A pack of wolf-like creatures the size of small horses walked toward them. Behind the wolves came what looked like a huge bear. Above them, the shadow of something with wings passed overhead. It could have been a dragon from old human stories, but the expected attack never came. Instead, the creatures approached with what could only be called curiosity. The leader of the wolf pack was a beautiful creature with silver fur and bright golden eyes. It sat down 20 feet away and tilted its head to one side. The bear thing was covered in dark fur and had long tusks. It sniffed the air and made a low rumbling sound that seemed almost like a greeting. "This cannot be real," Sam whispered. His hand moved away from his weapon as he realized these dangerous predators showed no signs of wanting to fight. They were not aggressive toward each other or toward the humans. Lisa's scanner was making crazy noises with all the readings it was getting. "Jake, these creatures are not just living together. They are talking to each other. Look at the brain activity. Patterns. There is some kind of shared thinking, or at least a way to communicate that we cannot detect." The dragon-like creature landed with surprising grace. Its scales reflected the alien sunlight in beautiful colors. It was smaller than the legends suggested, perhaps the size of a large horse, but its intelligence was clear. It looked directly at Jake and made a series of complex sounds that seemed almost like speech. "They are trying to talk to us," Tony said. His equipment was picking up electromagnetic patterns that seemed to match with the creature's sounds. "There is definitely intelligence here, but it is like nothing we have seen before." As the day went on, more creatures came out of the forest. Predators that should have been locked in endless combat instead moved in harmony. A pack of cats with long, sharp teeth played alongside bird-like creatures with razor-sharp claws. Huge reptile forms lay in the sun peacefully, while smaller, quicker predators ran between their legs. The big discovery came when Lisa's deep scan equipment found something extraordinary. Every creature on the planet showed signs of living together with a tiny organism that seemed to help them communicate and control their emotions. It was not just peaceful coexistence. It was active cooperation helped by a biological network that connected every predator on the planet. "They are not competing," Lisa said quietly, staring at her readings. "They are working together. This tiny organism has created a planet-wide consciousness among the top predators. They hunt together, protect each other, and share resources because they are all connected." As the sun set on their first day, the creatures began to go back into the forest. But before leaving, the wolf pack leader came directly to Jake. Huge creature looked into his eyes for a long moment. Jake felt something he could not explain. It was a sense of recognition, of acceptance. "I think," Jake said quietly, "we have just found a planet where evolution took a very different path. These are not just predators. They are a community." The next morning brought more surprises. The creatures returned to the clearing where the humans had set up their temporary camp. But this time, they brought gifts. The wolf pack leader carried strange fruits in its mouth. The bear creature brought interesting stones. The dragon thing brought a small plant with bright flowers. Lisa studied the gifts carefully. "These are not random items," she told the team. "Look at the patterns. The fruits are high in nutrients we need. The stones contain minerals that our equipment requires. The plant has medical properties. They are giving us exactly what we need to survive here." Tony made another discovery that changed everything. "The electromagnetic patterns are getting stronger," he reported. "It is like they are trying to include us in their communication network. They want to talk to us, but they need us to understand. Their language first." Sam, despite his training as a security officer, found himself fascinated by the bear creature. The huge animal seemed to understand that Sam was responsible for protecting the group. It began bringing him items that could be used for defense, weapons made from natural materials. "It knows my job," Sam said with wonder. "Somehow, it understands that I am here to keep everyone safe, and it wants to help." The breakthrough came when Jake decided to try something dangerous. He approached the wolf pack leader slowly, with his hands empty and open. The creature watched him carefully, then stepped forward. When Jake reached out his hand, the wolf leader touched his nose to Jake's palm. The moment of contact changed everything. Jake felt a rush of emotions that were not his own. Peace, curiosity, welcome, and something that could only be described as love. The creature was not just intelligent. It was capable of deep feeling, and it had already decided that the humans were worth protecting. "We are not alone here," Jake said, his voice filled with wonder. "We have found a family." 3 weeks had passed since the human team first landed. On P7742, they had built a temporary base camp in the forest clearing. The creatures, whom they now called the Communion, had not only accepted their presence, but seemed genuinely interested. And the humans. Every day brought new discoveries and deeper understanding. Dr. Lisa Warren had made breakthrough after breakthrough in studying the tiny organism she called the connector. The microscopic life form created brain pathways that allowed the planet's top predators to share emotions, intentions, and even basic thoughts. It was evolution's answer to the problem of too many predators. Instead of competing until some died, they had learned to work together. The connector does not just help them communicate, Lisa explained to Jake as they watched a group of dragon creatures playing with the wolf pack. It actually stops aggressive feelings toward other infected creatures while making protective instincts stronger. They have essentially evolved beyond the need for fighting over territory. Tony Garcia had been working day and night to understand the creature's communication patterns. His breakthrough came when he realized the Communion did not just communicate through sound. They used electromagnetic pulses, chemical signals, and even what appeared to be controlled electrical fields from their bodies. They are not just talking to each other, Tony told the team during their evening meeting. They are sharing a group consciousness. When one creature learns something, the knowledge spreads through the entire network. It is like a biological internet. The real surprise came when Sam Brooks, despite his initial doubt, formed an unexpected bond with the bear creature they had nicknamed Big Blue. The huge predator had shown up at camp every morning for a week, bringing gifts, strange fruits, interesting stones, and once, a small injured bird-like creature that it wanted the humans to help heal. "I think it is testing us," Sam said, as he carefully bandaged the bird's wing while Big Blue watched closely. "They want to know if we are the kind of creatures that help or harm." The test came when Jake fell sick with what appeared to be a severe allergic reaction to something in the planet's air. As he lay unconscious in the medical area of their temporary shelter, the communion creatures began to gather outside. They were not threatening. They were waiting. Lisa came out of the shelter to find dozens of the planet's top predators arranged in a circle around their camp. The wolf pack leader stepped forward and made a series of complex sounds while touching its nose to a small flowering plant it had brought. It is trying to help, Lisa realized. They know Jake is sick, and they are offering medicine. Working together, Lisa and the communion creatures identified the plant compound that could fix Jake's reaction. As Jake got better, something extraordinary happened. He began to feel a weak connection to the communion network. It is like whispers at the edge of hearing, Jake described the feeling. I can sense their emotions, their intentions. They are not just intelligent, they are compassionate. The turning point came when a group of creatures from outside the local communion territory arrived. These were predators that had not been exposed to the connector organism, and they were aggressive, territorial, and hungry. The local communion creatures immediately moved to protect the humans, but instead of fighting, they did something remarkable. Led by the wolf pack leader, they surrounded the hostile creatures and began a complex communication ritual. Within hours, the aggressive newcomers began to calm down. Lisa's scanners showed the connector organism being transferred through close contact, and by the next morning, the formerly hostile predators had been integrated into the local communion. They do not fight their enemies, Jake observed with wonder. They convert them. They literally make friends with every predator they encounter. Tony made another discovery that changed everything. The communion had been trying to share the connector organism with the humans from the beginning. The gifts, the close contact, the protective behavior. It was all part of an attempt to integrate the humans into their network. The question is, Lisa said, looking at the readings from Jake's blood work, do we let them? The debate that followed was intense. Jake, still recovering from his illness, but now experiencing occasional connections to the communion network, found himself caught between two worlds. The logical part of his mind warned against allowing an alien organism to change his biology, but the part of him that had touched the communion consciousness wanted that connection. The moral implications are huge, Lisa argued during their heated discussion. We are talking about allowing an alien parasite to fundamentally alter human brain structure. We do not know what the long-term effects might be. But look at what it has accomplished here, Tony replied, pointing toward the window where several communion creatures were visible, playing together in ways that went against every law of predator behavior. They have achieved something we have never managed: perfect cooperation among top predators. No war, no competition-based extinction, just pure collaboration. Sam Brooks, who had grown closest to the creatures during their stay, was surprisingly careful. I trust Big Blue with my life, he said, but I do not know if I trust an alien organism with my brain. The decision was taken out of their hands when their long-range communications detected an incoming signal. The Galactic Council had picked up their reports and was sending a full military expedition to P7742. The message was clear. The planet's resources were too valuable to leave in the hands of dangerous predators, and the unique biological network needed to be studied under controlled conditions. They are planning to strip mine the planet and capture the creatures for experimentation, Jake said, his voice hollow as he read the classified portions of the message. They will destroy everything the communion has built. The wolf pack leader appeared at the camp's edge as if called by Jake's distress. The connection was stronger now, and Jake could feel the creature's understanding of the situation. The entire communion network was aware of the threat. They are not running, Lisa observed, watching as more creatures emerged from the forest. They are planning to fight. But Jake felt something else through the connection. sadness. The communion creatures had never faced a threat they could not convert to friendship. They had no experience with beings who were immune to their influence, who would destroy rather than cooperate. "They are asking for our help," Jake said quietly. "Not just to fight, but to teach them how to survive in a universe where not everyone wants to be friends." The choice became clear in that moment. The approaching council fleet would arrive in 6 weeks. The communion creatures, for all their intelligence and cooperation, had no concept of warfare or deception. They were built by evolution to trust and integrate, not to fight and resist. "If we accept the connector organism," Lisa said slowly, "we become part of their network. We share their consciousness, but we also share their fate. If the Council decides to exterminate the communion, we will be classified as hostile aliens too. But if we do not," Tony added, "they will face the Council alone, and they will be destroyed. Their entire civilization, their entire way of life, will be lost." Sam stood up, his decision made. "Big Blue saved my life 3 times in the past week. These creatures have shown us a better way to live, a way without constant conflict. I am not going to abandon them now." One by one, the team members made their choice. They would accept the connector organism and become part of the communion network. It was not just about helping the creatures. It was about becoming something better than what they had been before. The transformation began immediately after the team made their decision. Jake was first, allowing the wolf pack leader to begin the full integration process. The creature gently touched its nose to Jake's forehead, and he felt the connector organism entering his system. The sensation was overwhelming. Suddenly, he could feel the emotions and thoughts of every creature in the local communion network. The love, the acceptance, the genuine care they felt for each other and for the humans was almost too much to bear. Jake understood now why the creatures had been so patient with them. They had been waiting for the humans to be ready to join their family. Lisa followed next, her scientific curiosity overcoming her remaining doubts. The moment the connector organism fully integrated with her nervous system, she gasped. "It is not just communication," she said in wonder. "It is pure empathy. They literally cannot feel hatred or aggression toward other communion members." Tony's integration brought him into contact with the planet's information network. He suddenly understood the electromagnetic communication system, not as an observer, but as a participant. "There are millions of them," he said in amazement. "The entire planet is connected. Every creature, every plant, every living thing is part of this network." Sam's integration with Big Blue was different, deeper, and more personal. The massive bear creature had specifically requested to be Sam's primary bond partner, and the connection was immediately strong. Sam could feel Big Blue's memories, its experiences, its absolute dedication to protecting the family it had chosen, which now included the humans. As the 4 humans completed their integration, they felt the communion network shift to accommodate them. They were no longer outsiders observing the creature society. They were full members, with all the rights and responsibilities that came with membership. "We are not human anymore," Jake said, but there was no sadness in his voice. "We are something new, something better. We are communion," Lisa agreed. "And we have a war to prepare for." The transformation of the human team was remarkable. Within days of full integration, they found themselves thinking and acting as a unified group while maintaining their individual personalities. The connector organism did not erase their humanity. It enhanced it with the collective wisdom and emotional stability of the communion network. Jake, now serving as the primary liaison between the human and communion consciousness, worked with the planet's distributed intelligence to develop defense strategies. The challenge was immense. The communion had evolved beyond warfare, but they were not helpless. They had capabilities the Galactic Council could not imagine. They are not just top predators, Jake explained to the assembled communion leaders, his thoughts being translated instantly across the network. They are a space-traveling civilization with weapons designed to kill from orbit. But they do not understand what we have become. The Wolf Pack leader, whom Jake had begun calling Silver for the distinctive fur pattern, shared images through the network of the planet's hidden capabilities. The Communion had spent millions of years developing their world, and they had resources the Council's first surveys had missed deep beneath the planet's surface. Vast networks of crystal formations served as biological computers, processing information for the entire Communion network. The dragon creatures were not just predators. They were living aircraft, capable of sustained flight and complex aerial maneuvers. The bear creatures, like Big Blue, were not just large. They were incredibly strong, capable of moving massive objects with ease. Lisa's integration had given her access to the planet's biological database. They have been preparing for this without knowing it, she realized. Every species on this planet has been optimized for cooperation and resource sharing. They can mobilize their entire ecosystem as a defense network. Tony's role became crucial as the Council fleet approached. His ability to interface with both human technology and Communion bionetworks allowed him to develop countermeasures the Council could not anticipate. The planet's communication network could be weaponized, creating electromagnetic pulses that would disrupt the Council's systems. They are expecting to fight primitive animals, Tony explained. They are not ready for a planet that thinks as one organism. Sam's bond with Big Blue proved invaluable for logistics. The bear creatures were natural engineers, capable of moving and shaping the landscape to create defensive positions. Under Sam's guidance, they began constructing hidden barriers and weapon emplacements using the planet's native materials. The Communion network buzzed with activity as millions of creatures across the planet prepared for the coming conflict. But their preparations were unlike anything in military history. Instead of armies, they organized rescue teams. Instead of weapons of destruction, they developed tools for capture and conversion. They still think they can make friends with the invaders, Jake mused, feeling the network's persistent optimism. Even now, they are hoping to integrate the Council forces into the Communion. The strategy that emerged was uniquely Communion. They would defend themselves, but their primary goal was to capture Council personnel and expose them to the connector organism. If they could convert enough of the invading force, they might be able to end the conflict without massive casualties. Lisa worked with the planet's biological network to develop a concentrated form of the connector organism that could be deployed. As an aerosol, it is not a weapon, she insisted. It is a cure. We are going to cure them of their aggression. The Council fleet arrived exactly on schedule, but their first surprise came when they tried to establish orbital superiority. The dragon creatures, working in perfect coordination, rose from the planet's atmosphere in massive formations. Their natural bioelectric fields, amplified by the Communion network, created interference patterns that disrupted the fleet's targeting systems. Admiral Ross Chun, commanding the Council fleet from the battleship Victorious, found his forces facing an enemy unlike anything in their tactical databases. They are not using conventional weapons, he reported to the Council. It is like the entire planet is fighting us. The first landing attempt failed when the Council's drop pods were intercepted by flying creatures that did not attack them, but instead carried them to designated landing zones where they were surrounded by Communion forces. The Council Marines found themselves facing predators that should have been tearing each other apart, but were instead working in perfect harmony. Stand down, Jake's voice came over the Council communication channels. We do not want to fight you. We want to show you a better way. Admiral Chon's response was predictable. Orbital bombardment. But the Communion was ready. The planet's bionetwork had prepared defensive measures that the Council could not have imagined. Massive trees released clouds of spores that interfered with targeting systems. Underground networks of creatures created ground disturbances that disrupted bombardment patterns. The real battle was not fought with weapons. It was fought with ideas. Every Council soldier who was captured was exposed to the Communion network, and many chose to join rather than fight. The connector organism did not force conversion, but it did allow people to experience the peace and cooperation that the Communion represented. As the conflict continued, Admiral Chun found his forces increasingly divided. Some soldiers were defecting to the Communion, others were questioning their orders, and a few were actively sabotaging the mission. "We are not losing to superior firepower," he reported grimly to the Council. "We are losing to superior philosophy." The tide of battle was turning, but not in the way anyone had expected. The Communion was winning not through violence, but through conversion. They were making friends with their enemies, one soldier at a time. The turning point came when Admiral Chun himself was captured during a failed ground assault. Sam and Big Blue had cornered his command unit in a canyon, and instead of fighting, the massive bear creature had simply sat down and waited. The Admiral's troops, exhausted and confused by an enemy that seemed more interested in talking than fighting, eventually surrendered. Chun expected torture or execution, but instead found himself in a comfortable shelter, being tended to by creatures that should have been his enemies. The wolf pack leader Silver brought him food. A dragon creature provided warmth. And Jake Morrison, the human who had supposedly gone native, sat down to have a conversation. "I know what you are thinking," Jake said, his voice carrying the calm certainty that came from the Communion connection. "You think we have been brainwashed, controlled by alien parasites. But that is not what happened. We chose this." Chun's military training fought with his growing curiosity about the Communion. "You are telling me you willingly allowed an alien organism to alter your brain?" "I am telling you we discovered something our species has been searching for since we first formed societies," Jake replied. "True cooperation. Not the fragile alliances we build out of mutual fear or benefit, but genuine care for each other's well-being." The demonstration came when one of Chun's wounded soldiers was brought to the shelter. The man had been injured in a fall during the canyon assault, and his condition was getting worse. Without hesitation, Lisa and several Communion creatures worked together to treat him, sharing medical knowledge through the network to find the best treatment approach. "They are helping my people," Chun observed, his worldview beginning to shift. "Why?" "Because they are part of our community now." Sam explained, his bond with Big Blue allowing him to translate the bear creature's concern for the wounded soldier. "The Communion does not distinguish between friend and enemy. There are only family members you have not met yet." The real breakthrough came when Chun was offered a choice. He could return to his fleet with a message, or he could experience the Communion connection temporarily, just long enough to understand what it really meant. "I am a military officer," Chun said. "I have spent my career learning to fight. What you are offering goes against everything I believe." "Then experience it and decide for yourself," Jake offered. 1 hour. If you do not like what you feel, we will send you back to your ship with no hard feelings. Chun's hour in the Communion network changed everything. For the first time in his life, he experienced the absence of fear, of competition, of the constant watchfulness that had defined his existence. He felt the genuine care that the Communion creatures had for each other and for the humans who had joined them. When the connection ended, Chun sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he looked up at Jake. "How do we do this? How do we convince the Council that you are not a threat?" "We do not," Jake replied. "We convince them that we are the solution to a problem they did not know they had." The plan that emerged was bold. Instead of fighting the Council forces, The Communion would demonstrate their capabilities by solving the galaxy's most pressing problem. The ongoing war between the hegemony and the Federation had been raging for decades, killing millions and consuming resources that could have been used to build a better future, using their unique ability to facilitate communication and understanding. The Communion offered to serve as mediators in the conflict. Chun, now serving as their advocate, presented the proposal to the Council with a simple challenge. Give the Communion one chance to prove that their way of life could benefit the entire galaxy. The Council's initial response was skeptical. How? Could primitive creatures from a single planet solve a conflict that the galaxy's best diplomats had failed to resolve? But as more of their forces were converted to the Communion way of thinking, the pressure mounted to at least consider the proposal. They are not primitive, reported Captain Lavra Hayes, one of the first Council officers to be fully integrated into the Communion network. They have capabilities we cannot begin to understand. They can literally make enemies into friends. If they can do that on a galactic scale, the implications are staggering. The mediation was arranged to take place on P7742, with representatives from both sides of the galactic conflict. The Communion creatures, working through their human partners, would facilitate discussions that had been impossible for decades. The connector organism would be offered voluntarily to the negotiators, allowing them to experience genuine empathy for their enemies. It is not about winning or losing, Lisa explained to the assembled diplomats. It is about finding solutions that work for everyone. The Communion has spent millions of years perfecting this process. The negotiations were unlike anything in galactic history. For the first time, military leaders from opposing sides could literally feel each other's concerns and motivations. The artificial barriers that had sustained the conflict for so long began to crumble in the face of genuine understanding. General Marcus, Stone of the Hegemony, found himself sitting across from Admiral Elena Rodriguez of the Federation, both of them connected to the Communion network. For the first time in 30 years of warfare, they could feel each other's genuine desire for peace. I never understood, Stone said quietly, tears running down his face as he experienced Rodriguez's memories of losing her home planet to hegemony bombardment. I never knew what we were really doing to your people, and I never felt your fear. Rodriguez replied, her own voice breaking as she experienced Stone's memories of Federation raids on civilian targets. You were not monsters. You were just scared. Tony's role became crucial as he worked to establish communication protocols that could work across the galaxy. The Communion network could be extended through space, creating a form of instantaneous communication that made cooperation possible on a galactic scale. The breakthrough came when they realized that the connector organism could be synthesized and distributed through communication networks. It would not force conversion, but it would allow beings across the galaxy to experience the empathy and understanding that made true cooperation possible. We are not talking about mind control, Jake explained to the gathered representatives. We are talking about emotional transparency. When you can truly feel what another being is experiencing, conflict becomes much harder to justify. The pilot program began with volunteer colonies on the edge of hegemony and Federation space. The results were immediate and dramatic. Border conflicts that had raged for years were resolved in days. Trade agreements that had been impossible to negotiate were worked out in hours. But the real test came when a hegemony patrol ship encountered a Federation convoy in disputed space. Instead of the expected battle, the two forces found themselves working together to rescue survivors from a merchant vessel that had been attacked by pirates. This changes everything, reported the hegemony commander. When you can feel the Federation crew's genuine desire to help, when you can sense their concern for the survivors, it becomes impossible to see them as enemies. The success of the pilot program led to rapid expansion of the Communion network. Worlds that had been locked in, conflict for generations began to find peaceful solutions to their disputes. The galaxy's economy, no longer drained by constant warfare, began to flourish. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in the humans themselves. Jake, Lisa, Tony, and Sam had become something new, ambassadors of a philosophy that was transforming the galaxy. They were still recognizably human, but they carried within them the wisdom and compassion of an entire planet's worth of interconnected consciousness. "We did something no one thought was possible," Lisa observed as she watched former enemies working together to build a new research station. "We found a way to make cooperation more powerful than competition." The war between the hegemony and the Federation officially ended 6 months after the first mediation session on P7742. The signing ceremony was held in the same forest clearing where the humans had first encountered the communion creatures. As representatives from across the galaxy gathered to witness the historic moment, Jake stood with Silver, the wolf pack leader who had started it all. The connection between them was stronger than ever, carrying not just the emotions of their own relationship, but the hope and joy of billions of beings who are finally free from the cycle of endless conflict. "This is just the beginning," Jake thought, his consciousness touching the vast network of minds that had become his family. "We are going to change everything." 5 years had passed since the peace treaty that ended the Great Galactic War. The forest clearing on P7742 had become the most important place in the galaxy, transformed into a sprawling complex where beings from hundreds of worlds came to learn the communion way of life. Jake Morrison stood at the center of what had once been their simple landing site, watching as former enemies worked side by side to build a better future. He was no longer just a human ship captain. He had become something unique in galactic history, a bridge between the old way of thinking and the new consciousness that was spreading across the stars. The transformation had been remarkable. Worlds that had known nothing but conflict for centuries were now sharing resources and knowledge freely. The communion network, no longer limited to a single planet, stretched across space through quantum communication arrays that allowed instant empathy and understanding between distant civilizations. Lisa Warren had become the galaxy's leading expert on consciousness integration. Her research center on P7742 was constantly busy with beings who wanted to understand how the connector organism worked and how it could be safely introduced to new species. "Each species is different," she explained to a group of delegates from the Outer Rim territories. "The connector organism adapts to the neural patterns of each race, but the result is always the same: enhanced empathy, reduced aggression, and the ability to truly understand others." Tony Garcia's communication networks had become the backbone of the new galactic civilization. His quantum empathy transmitters allowed beings on opposite sides of the galaxy to share emotions and experiences in real time. Disputes that once would have led to war were now resolved through mediated sessions where each side could literally feel the other's perspective. "We are not just exchanging information anymore," Tony told the gathered technicians at his latest installation ceremony. "We are sharing consciousness itself." When a being on Rigel can feel the hopes and fears of someone on Vega, the galaxy becomes a much smaller and friendlier place. Sam Brooks had perhaps undergone the most dramatic transformation. His bond with Big Blue had evolved into something that redefined what it meant to be both human and alien. He served as the primary instructor for new species joining the communion, helping them understand that strength came not from domination, but from protection and care. "The hardest lesson for most species is learning to trust," Sam explained to a group of warrior caste aliens who had come to learn communion principles. "You have spent your lives believing that others are threats to be defeated. But when you can feel their genuine desire for peace, when you can sense their fear and hope just as clearly as your own, everything changes." The success stories were Countless. The mining guilds of the inner systems had gone from cutthroat competition to cooperative resource sharing. The exploration fleets that once raced to claim new worlds now worked together to ensure that first contact with new species was peaceful and beneficial for everyone involved. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in the nature of governance itself. The old Galactic Council, with its endless debates and political maneuvering, had been replaced by a new form of collective decision-making. Representatives from member worlds were connected through the communion network during deliberations, allowing them to feel the impact of their decisions on billions of beings. "We no longer vote based on political advantage," explained Councilor Elena Rodriguez, the former Federation admiral, who now served as one of the primary voices of the new government. "We vote based on what we can feel will bring the greatest good to the greatest number of beings. When you can literally experience the suffering that bad policies cause, it becomes impossible to support them." The economic transformation had been equally dramatic. The galaxy's resources, no longer wasted on weapons and warfare, were being channeled into exploration, research, and improving the quality of life for all beings. Poverty had not been eliminated, but the cooperative networks that now spanned the galaxy ensured that no one went without basic necessities. Jake often walked through the original forest where they had first encountered the communion creatures. Silver, now an elder in the pack, still accompanied him on these walks. Their bond had deepened over the years, becoming a template for the relationships that were forming between humans and aliens across the galaxy. "Do you ever regret it?" Jake asked during one of their evening walks, his question flowing through the network to reach not just Silver, but the entire planetary consciousness. "Do you ever wish you had remained just predators, without the responsibility of caring for an entire galaxy?" The response came as a wave of contentment and purpose that encompassed millions of connected minds. The communion had found their true calling, not as apex predators dominating their environment, but as healers helping to cure the galaxy's addiction to conflict and competition. But the work was far from over. New species were discovered regularly, and not all of them were immediately receptive to the communion way of life. Some had been so traumatized by centuries of warfare that they found it difficult to trust anyone. Others were so aggressive by nature that integration required careful planning and patience. The latest challenge came from the far sectors, where a species called the Devourers had been consuming entire civilizations for millennia. They were intelligent, but seemed incapable of empathy, viewing other beings as nothing more than resources to be harvested. "They are the ultimate test," Lisa admitted during a strategy session with the core team. "If we can find a way to integrate the Devourers into the communion, we will have proven that truly any species can learn to Cooper."